The best TV shows of 2019, so far. There's been a tremendous amount of great television since January, and so are Vulture's picks for the best TV shows of 2019, so far. A Black Lady sketch show, HBO. This HBO sketch comedy series, created by Robin Thede and starring Thede and a core cast of hilarious black women, is both funny and long overdue. The sketches on the series are not just lol-worthy, but surprising, escalating again and again to conclusions that viewers won't see coming. But most important, the humor is completely steeped in the perspectives of black women, which makes this series not only a consistent hoot, but a groundbreaking one. Jen Chaney. The Act, Hulu. Even if you already know the story of Dee Dee Blanchard, her daughter Gypsy, and the lies perpetuated about Gypsy's allegedly debilitating illness, The Act is still engrossing television. If you don't, these 10 episodes inspired by their story will make you say, "Are you kidding me?" almost as frequently as you did during Abducted in Plain Sight and Wild, Wild Country. As conceived by co-creators Nick Antosca and Michelle Dean, the latter of whom wrote a BuzzFeed article about the Blanchards, The Act is a tense, nuanced exploration of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. But what really makes this show a can't-miss is its consistently superb performances, most notably from its two leads, Patricia Arquette as Dee Dee, a honey dripper of a con artist, and Joey King as Gypsy, whose girlish behavior serves as both disguise and a genuine reflection of her sheltered existence. This deeply codependent mother-daughter relationship is one of the more disturbing and memorable love stories we'll see on TV this year. J.C. Barrie, HBO. In its first season, Barrie was a great dramedy about a hitman attempting to leave the killing life in order to pursue acting. In its second, Barrie rose to exceptional heights. The writing, the directing, by the likes of Hiro Murai and the show's co-creator Bill Hader, and the acting across the board became even more layered, deliberate, and gripping. Yes, this is still a show about a hitman attempting to leave the killing life in order to pursue acting, but it's more broadly about whether it's possible for anyone to lead an honest life. P.S. It's also darkly hilarious and the only show that features a Chechen gangster, Anthony Carrigan's glorious NoHo Hank, who's more concerned with the quality of the table on which he plans to sort heroin than he is about the quality of the heroin he plans to sell. J.C. Pamela Adlon in Better Things. Photo, Suzanne Tenner, FX. Pamela Adlon's series about a divorced single mother and actress posts its strongest season this year, doubling down on its storytelling style, which expands and explores individual moments, and going for broke in the direction Adlon helms every episode in addition to co-writing, producing, and starring. There are at least a dozen sequences in this batch of 12 episodes that affirm the idea that cinematic isn't just a synonym for, "we spent a lot of money." Adlon has a rare ability to suggest the emotional interiors of characters even as she gives them their space. Matt Zoller cites Big Mouth, Netflix. This Netflix animated series about the young and horny has always focused on the sexual aspects of coming of age, and it continues to do that in its third season. But like middle schoolers transforming into their young adult selves, it also explores new avenues of storytelling. An entire episode functions as a biopic about Duke Ellington, while another involves the staging of a musical version of the 1994 erotic thriller Disclosure. But it also demonstrates, in always hilarious and occasionally poignant fashion, that growing up means letting go of childish things, and, sometimes, childhood friends. J.C. Blown Away, Netflix. Yes, we've reached the point in peak TV where there's now a show about glassblowing. And wouldn't you know? It's actually good. 10 contestants are given a different artistic challenge each episode and progressively eliminated until we're down to the final 2. That structure is the same as every other reality competition show. But what distinguishes Blown Away is how seriously it takes its craft, and how eye-opening it is to watch the sweaty, complex, daunting process of turning glass fragments into sculpted artistic statements. This isn't just a contest, it's a portal into a form of creative expression that most people have never seen up close. J.C. Bojack Horseman, Netflix. The first half of the final season unfolds exactly as you would hope. Ex-sitcom star Bojack, voiced by Will Arnett, is working his way through rehab and still trying to be a better, horseman. All of the characters this season, Diane, Alison Brie, Princess Carolyn, Amy Sedaris, even clueless Todd Aaron Paul, are learning what it means to truly give oneself to something bigger. In classic Bojack fashion, they're all doing it on a show that takes astute jabs at the Hollywood establishment and drops clever Easter eggs into practically every frame. Bojack and co. may still be seeking self-improvement. But Bojack Horseman remains as good as TV gets. J.C. Catastrophe, Amazon. A moving and unexpectedly cosmic finale made the fourth season of Catastrophe the best since its first. This consistently surprising romantic comedy from the creative team of Rob Delaney and Sharon Horgan showed the main characters and their immediate circle coming to terms with age, compromise, and the finiteness of life, and figuring out how to create a bubble of contentment within a chaotic world. The season would have been moving even if it hadn't given co-star Carrie Fisher a formal send-off, but the touching and raucously funny memorial episode, doubling as the series' ender, made the whole thing feel cathartic. MZS. Chernobyl, HBO. What's the worst that can happen? This. Writer Craig Mazin and director Johan Renckx subject the 1986 nuclear disaster at Chernobyl to a long-deferred political autopsy, showing how an incompetent, fearful, ass-covering bureaucracy can make an already unthinkably awful situation 100 times worse. Combining horror, black comedy, and political satire, and tying it all together with a respectful, at times funereal tone, this is one of the feel-bad events of the TV year, and strangely cathartic for that reason. MZS. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, The CW. The best way to stick the landing when you're finishing a long-running TV series is to craft an ending that feels true to the show's best self. That's what Crazy Ex-Girlfriend star and creator Rachel Bloom and co-creator Aline Brosh McKenna did in this fourth and final season, bringing all of their characters into direct confrontation with their desires for the future and the consequences of their past choices, and refusing to wrap anything up in a neat little box. The end of Rebecca's Odyssey was particularly resonant because it paralleled Bloom's own story, seeking introspection and catharsis through art, without making any unrealistic promises about the quality of the art that the star's alter ego might eventually deliver. The more you think about that final scene, the more reminiscent it is of Mad Men, which likewise ended on a hopeful note without overpromising in the personal growth department. MZS. The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, Netflix. Returning to the heyday of Jim Henson and Frank Oz's creative peak, this lavish Netflix series is a prequel to the 1982 puppet fantasy Dark Crystal, which was deemed too dark for popular taste. As it happens, popular taste eventually caught up. Not only did the movie find a loyal cult audience, it helped pave the way for wildly popular, rather dark fantasies like Peter Jackson's Tolkien adaptations and Game of Thrones. Directed by Louis Leterrier, The Incredible Hulk, Clash of the Titans, this series, set on a planet far away, boasts extraordinary old-school puppeteering and practical effects, treating every scene and image as a chance to dazzle the eye. MZS. David Makes Man Own. Terrell Alvin McCraney wrote the play that inspired the movie Moonlight, so it's no surprise that the own drama he created is reminiscent of that Oscar-winning film. Set in Miami and focused on David, Akili McDowell, a private school student who lives in the projects, the series often departs into hazy, waking dream-like digressions that reflect David's exhausted mental state. But it's just as committed to realistically depicting the pressures that come with being young, gifted, and black in contemporary America. David Makes Man features strong performances from up-and-coming actors, McDowell included. The way it depicts the struggles of black kids on both ends of the economic spectrum, telling their stories from the inside out, makes it not just good television, but vital television. J.C. Diagnosis, Netflix. Medical shows are one of the oldest TV genres. But Diagnosis, a docuseries based on the New York Times Magazine column by Dr. Lisa Sanders, takes stories of disease, doctors, and cures into new territory that reflects an increasingly collaborative approach toward medicine. Each episode focuses on a patient dealing with a rare affliction that medical professionals have struggled to identify or effectively treat. Sanders takes on each case and uses her platform to crowdsource a diagnosis, relying not only on doctors and health experts, but also others who have experienced similar symptoms. The result is a series that's uplifting without being too treacly, and one that highlights the shortcomings of modern, for-profit medicine as well as the idea that sometimes it takes a village to treat an illness. J.C. Documentary Now. IFC. The latest season of this documentary parody series was 3 years in the making, its production complicated by the busy schedules of its founding co-stars, co-creators, but these irritations seemingly spurred the storytellers to new heights of sophistication and invention. Juicy major roles went to heavy-hitting guest stars, including Cate Blanchett, Michael Keaton, Owen Wilson, Natasha Lyonne, and Michael C. Hall. And the scripts went all in on tip-of-the-iceberg characterizations, implying that the subjects depicted in the films were all much deeper and more troubled than the filmmakers' preconceptions could capture, and metafictional subtext. Some of the latter amounted to a philosophical critique of non-fiction filmmaking and its practitioners, the sort of thing you'd expect to hear during a film festival Q&A, but never on a series that appears on commercial cable. MZS. Euphoria HBO. Exuberantly embracing the idea that too much can be just right, this teen melodrama from Sam Levinson is set in a Southern California bedroom community, but tells the story in a fantastically exaggerated, expressionistic style, storyboarding all the action to within an inch of its life, and filming mainly on constructed sets rather than real locations, the better to permit acrobatic camera moves and wild lighting effects. Essentially Paul Thomas Anderson's My So-Called Life, if you can imagine such a thing. Euphoria is completely over the top yet sincere in the way that teenagers themselves are. There are no small moments. Even the grace notes are epic. MZS. Fleabag, Amazon. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and it has certainly grown justifiably fonder for this British series created by the bundle of side-eyed brilliance that is its star, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. When the first season of this character study dropped on Amazon back in 2016, it received positive notices but not a lot of buzz. But the second season, still full of Waller-Bridge's signature fourth-wall-shattering commentary, has become one of the hottest topics on social media, at least among the TV-watching cognoscenti. Waller-Bridge is as sharp as ever, and the storytelling is even more focused, particularly with regard to a budding romance between Fleabag and a hot priest played by Andrew Scott that has forced Twitter to collectively and repeatedly fan itself in appreciation. It's 6 episodes of perfection that you'll want to watch all over again the second you finish. J.C. Fosse, Verdun, FX. This series about the creative and romantic relationship between director-choreographer Bob Fosse, Sam Rockwell, and dancer-choreographer-actress Gwen Verdun, Michelle Williams, was catnip to theater history obsessives, marinating in marginalia and dropping references and names so generously that it's hard to imagine a casual viewer stumbling upon it and becoming immersed. Yet the specificity of it, particularly in showing the minute details of collaboration, is a big part of what made it feel unique. That and the mosaic storytelling, which focused on particular periods of weeks and months in the couple's life and didn't try to wrap things up with any grand statement. It's far from perfect. Rockwell is a bit too reticent and internal, perhaps, and it probably erred by focusing on Fosse's by now stereotypical, bad genius behavior in the first couple of episodes, when Verdun ultimately defined the character of the entire piece. But the more you sit with this one, the more substantial it feels. MZS. Glow, Netflix. Betty Gilpin and Alison Brie in Glow. Photo, Ali Goldstein, Netflix. The third season of the female wrestling dramedy shifts the action from LA to Las Vegas, where the gorgeous ladies of wrestling are staging a live show several nights a week. Another show working in this very specific milieu, pro wrestling in Vegas in the 80s, would have leaned hard into the cheesy, neon, fluorescent camp of that setting. But while Glow still has more than its share of big hair, it goes a more satisfying and subtle route, capturing the claustrophobic state of limbo that sets in when you're living and working in a hotel on the Strip. Glow gives more of the members of its ensemble cast time to shine, most notably Gail Rankin's Sheila the She-Wolf. But it also continues to dissect the relationship between Ruth, Alison Brie, and Debbie, Betty Gilpin, the best friends turned rivals turned colleagues who continue to look to each other for reaffirmation. Separately, Brie and Gilpin are fantastic. Together, they're dynamite. J.C. Leaving Neverland, HBO. Michael Jackson and Wade Robson in Leaving Neverland. Photo, courtesy of Sundance Institute. It almost feels disrespectful to consider this 2-part, 4-hour documentary about 2 sexual abuse survivors in the context of lighter entertainment. Director Dan Reed's film concentrates on 2 adult men who say they were groomed for underage sex abuse by Michael Jackson, whose behavior was the subject of 2 prior civil actions. But the documentary is ultimately less interested in bringing down a legend than in bearing witness to Wade Robson and James Safechuck, men who still carry the scars of a profoundly damaging experience they say they suffered at the hands of Jackson. The bulk of Leaving Neverland's running time is dominated by close-ups of their faces, and by the sounds of their voices, which seem to come from a lightless place deep in their psyches. MZS. Los Spookies, HBO. Bernardo Velasco, Ana Fabrega, and Julio Torres in Los Spookies. Photo, HBO. This half-hour comedy, co-created by Fred Armisen, SNL writer Julio Torres, and comedian Ana Fabrega, plays by its own set of idiosyncratic rules. Set in Mexico and LA, it uses subtitles at all times, English when someone is speaking Spanish, and Spanish when someone is speaking English. It follows a horror group who stage scary situations, sea monster invasions, exorcisms, you know, the usual, in exchange for money. It's the kind of show where a line like, "I just met a parasitic demon that lives inside of me. But I'm free now. What's up?" is spoken with a straight face and is entirely accurate. It's a very special, wonderful kind of weird. J.C. Mindhunter, Netflix. Jonathan Groff and Holt McCallany in Mindhunter. Photo, courtesy of Netflix. The second season of David Fincher's deep dive into serial killer psychology isn't great because of its dead-on portraits of actual famous murderers, although that certainly doesn't hurt. The conversations that FBI agent protagonists Holden Ford, Jonathan Groff, and Bill Tench, Holt McCallany, have with David, son of Sam, Berkowitz, Oliver Cooper, and, especially, Charles Manson, a superb Damon Harriman, are fascinating and unnerving to watch. But like the rest of the series, they tell us something about the men who, along with their colleague, Wendy Carr, Anna Torv, are trying to understand what makes homicidal maniacs tick without considering that their internal clocks are built using similar machinery. On the surface, this season of Mindhunter becomes increasingly focused on the famous Atlanta child murders that happened in the late 70s and early 80s. But really it's about how, in different ways, every human being seeks attention and often gains it the more lurid their story becomes. J.C. The OA, Part 2, Netflix. It took more than 2 years for the second season of The OA, the spiritual mystery thriller puzzle box of a Netflix drama from Britt Marling and Zalbit Manglage, to finally arrive. The result is an even more complex, sprawling, self-serious journey through multiple dimensions. It's also a more confusing one that made my eyes roll on more than one occasion. So why does this show make the cut, then? Because of its ambition, its fierce commitment to its extremely particular artistic sensibility, and a twist ending that made me immediately curious to see a Part 3. J.C. On My Block, Netflix. Set in the fictional Los Angeles neighborhood of Freeridge, and co-created by Lauren Iungerich, Awkward, and the screenwriting team of Eddie Gonzalez and Jeremy Haft, All Eyes on Me, this team-driven series favors broad comedy built around shenanigans. But it also manages to swing between that mode and the crime thriller, the telenovela, and social satire, sometimes within the space of a few minutes. Even when the viewer gets whiplash, it's impossible not to appreciate the multitudes that this modest show contains. MZS.